Even if you attended PAX Unplugged, there's a fairly decent chance that you missed something amongst the more subtle reveals. Dungeons & Dragons in 2024 is going to look very different than it does today, and Wizards of the Coast has made some bold choices. Of course, many of those choices only got a 2-second reveal, so it's hard to know if you actually caught everything. Ready to find out? The announcement of the Lost Caverns of Tsojcanth? Sojcanth? Whatever. The Lost Caverns adventure is a remake of a Gary Gygax classic, meaning that there's a fairly decent chance that even when reworked for 5th edition, it's going to be a bit of a meat grinder. You should expect a fair amount of lethality from this particular adventure, which was something that they didn't really say was the case, but kind of implied when talking about how it could be used in tournament play. They also mentioned that they would include the scoring system, allowing you to perhaps run it for a couple of your own home groups in order to be able to let them compete in how they complete the adventure. More details still needed to be able to suss that one out, but it's something that I'm definitely looking forward to. Interestingly, though, what this does tell us is that they are putting out a product that is intended to be a one-shot that is going to stand alone and be released alone instead of in the various anthologies that have been recently popular. This marks a possibility of a bunch of new content that could be coming to us in smaller packages and hopefully at smaller prices so that everybody can enjoy exactly the adventure that they want instead of having to pick up the latest and greatest anthology. However, speaking of latest and greatest anthologies, we have the announcement of the Quests of the Infinite Staircase. The idea of an infinity staircase that carries on in every direction, in this case, has been alluded that it includes the passage of space and time, allowing the adventures within to, like many of the other anthologies, have completely different settings. However, in this case, the anthologies, in fitting with the 50th anniversary theme, is going to be filled with a bunch of older adventures remastered for the 2024 edition of Dungeons & Dragons. Very similar to what was done for the Tales of the Yawning Portal. Obviously, these should be able to be drag and dropped into various adventures on their own, but they'll also have a convenient narrative reason for you to be hopping between them along this strange infinite stairway. What goes unsaid but was perhaps hinted at is that because this stairway is allowing you to go through time and space, and these adventures are going to take place in their individual settings, that we will be receiving minor setting information about a lot of old classic locations instead of building out new and fanciful ones that we've never seen before. This could potentially update those settings or allow people to retrieve them as they were, in many cases, decades and decades ago. As of yet, there's not a ton of details about each and every adventure that was in there, but they did mention the Village of Hamlet, which is a starter adventure from Gary Gygax. I'm not really sure what qualifies as a starter meat grinder, or whether Gygax waited until people were lulled into a sense of false security before he leapt upon them with things like the Tomb of Horrors. Speaking of massive and terrifying plots, Vecna Eve of Ruin is the massive, sprawling adventure that has been set to release. A full adventure path focusing around the villain Vecna, who has got himself just a little bit of notoriety in recent years.
Hail, Lord Vecna.
Thanks, Stranger Things. While that sounds like fun, what was really the 2-second mention that tells me that Wizards of the Coast knows that there are things that we really want, but doesn't necessarily know how on earth to tell people about what's the most important thing and detail? This adventure is slated to go from level 1 to 20. This marks the first 5th edition product that truly covers that entire gamut, unless of course you count Dungeons of the Mad Mage, and just as a spoiler alert, given that it's not really a published adventure that has a long-term story, but just a mega dungeon playground, I don't. Even though I'm in the process of running it a second time now and still enjoy terrorizing people with Hallister Blackcloak. Finally having some support for final tier play could mean that we're going to see more of this in the future. Much like the inclusion of a one-shot book in the lineup for 2024, this is big and exciting news. We didn't get a ton by way of information about the 2024 Player's Handbook in this case, but what we did get is to see some really sick and amazing looking art. This book is set to be the largest Player's Handbook yet, and it looks like that might be because they slapped in more pictures than ever before, and if the ones that were shown to us are any indicator, then they're not going to be too shabby. Naturally, the concern comes up at exactly what kind of price point we're going to be looking at for this picturesque book of pictures. But we're going to have to wait to find out on that until a little bit later. However, what was revealed was that the Artificer would not be getting an inclusion into the 2024 Player's Handbook. This wasn't necessarily stuff that we hadn't anticipated, but it seems to be a final deal now, as there will be 48 subclasses, 4 of them for each class, meaning only 12. And since we've seen playtest material for all of the others, we can go ahead and just cross getting the Artificer playtest off of our Christmas list. Something that is also revealed by saying that we're only going to have 4 subclasses for each is that either Wizards is intending on creating a subclass that can be customized based upon the school of wizardry that a wizard of the traditional colleges is intending to follow, or we're only going to get 4 wizard colleges included in our 2024 Player's Handbook. Are we going to see just the subtypes that were included in the Unearthed Arcana material, or are those subclasses that we've already seen just going to have informed the design choices that are made in the released version? And instead, we're going to see something like College Mage that allows you to pick from all of the above, Blade Singer and Scribe's Wizard and other beloved subclasses. However that shakes out, it is definitely not going to be the same as your 2014 Player's Handbook. Similarly, something that's going to see some big changes to the 2014 Player's Handbook is that every subclass will include a picture. Wizards really seems to be embracing the idea of a picture is worth 1,000 words and desires to make sure that everybody can get a mental image of the kind of character that they want to create. There was only like 10 minutes spent on the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Monster Manual combined, indicating that there's probably still quite a bit up in the air in that particular case. The Dungeon Master's Guide will include a full campaign setting. But what was not mentioned was which campaign setting it would be. Of course, there's the possibility that we're going to see a redo of the Forgotten Realms and the Sword Coast just slapped in there by ripping it out of Storm King's Thunder and the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. But I suspect that it's something that's going to be a little more exciting, because they very purposefully did not reveal which one. However, in another offhand comment, they talked about how magic items are going to be seeing changes in the 2024 edition. And the kinds of changes that they talked about were very interesting. They talked about how they would not be changing the rarity of magic items that already existed in other sources but were making their way into that particular book. Which means in order for them to change them and yet not rebalance the absurd rarities that have been placed on certain items, they're going to have to adjust the items individually to the power level of their appropriate tier. Whether or not they're going to do a perfect job at that, or just going to give it a go, or whether or not they have some completely other idea, like that changing art changes the magic item, I don't honestly know. But my suspicion is that they're going to rebalance items so that the tier that they are in matches the power level that they are granting. Much like how they're placing requirements on feats in order to do a similar sort of rebalancing. I can hope. Anyway, unsurprisingly, the Monster Manual is going to be updated in a big way, but there were a couple of announcements there that were pretty fun. First, and perhaps least important for some and most important for others, each of the monsters in the Monster Manual is going to get new art. Secondly, there is going to be an increased number of NPCs in the book, and I'm really hopeful that this is going to mean that they're giving the same kind of focus to spreading NPCs across all the tiers of play and all CRs that was placed into Glory of the Giants. If that's the case, the NPC section is going to be a robust tool allowing us to pull characters and NPCs into the game that don't have to be monstrous in order to be both challenging threats when combat inevitably ensues and creatures with interesting mechanics to be able to influence a wide array of encounters. Speaking of a wide array and the CRs of creatures, the higher tier monsters are getting rebalanced to add more survivability, but also getting a significant increase in the amount of damage that they're putting out. Much like the Glory of the Giants, I suspect that we're going to see monsters that can truly kick a little bit of tail and that are more action oriented with bonus actions, spells, and other things available to them so that choices are never far afield and so that the player's action economy doesn't completely overwhelm your boss monster quite so easily. Similarly, there's apparently a strong focus on going through each monster and providing it with some kind of unique feature that is going to make that monster stand out and be interesting in some manner so that we don't just have large pools of hit points that have a single special ability or no special ability at all except the ability to take a ton of hits before they fall down. One creature that was announced was the inclusion of the Blob of Annihilation, CR 20+. This creature was already coined by Blaine Simple as being the giant monster waifu. Waifu? How do you even say that? Clearly I don't watch enough anime. When it all comes down to it, I'm sure I missed something at PAX Unplugged. If you spotted it, let me know, because I'm excited about 2024. And if you're interested in learning about what 2024 is going to look like, then make sure you check out my videos on the ongoing playtesting for more details. Thanks for watching. Happy adventuring.